I'm Drew Decker with U.S. Geological Survey, and welcome to the USGS Hydrography Community Call. I'm joined by Vanessa Baez and Becky Anderson. Presenter today is Ariel Damboya with USGS NGP. She is the Cartographic Products Lead. And Ariel, is everything ready with you?
I am. So with that, I'll just go ahead and get started with the presentation. So today we're going to talk about Topo Builder and On-Demand Topo. This is an application that was just released to the public actually 4 weeks ago today. And so what is Topo Builder? So let's get my slides. Okay, so Topo Builder is an application that lets you as a user make your own topographic map. All of the maps are created on demand. That means they are generated at the time that you request them. The maps are also centered where you want, and you can export them in multiple formats. And we use the best available national map data to produce these topographic maps. And I'll talk a little bit more about that best available data and exactly what it means in relation to hydrography. So Topo Builder is an application that supports responsible resource management, sustainable energy development, hazard risk reduction, recreation and tourism, as well as public health and security. And so some of the examples that you can think about this for resource management, this could be sustainable management of watersheds, environmental impact assessments. For energy development, it could be potential locations for new facilities. For hazards and risk reduction, it could be natural disasters like fires, floods, landslides, tornadoes. So there's just so many different applications for these topographic maps. And now that you're able to create them on demand and center them where you want, it just increases the value of what we've had previously, which was the US Topo product. So I'm going to jump right into a demo of the application. So this is the Topo Builder application, and you can access this from topobuilder.nationalmap.gov. When you first open up the application, you are going to be on the Map Types tab. And from here, it tells you to select an on-demand topo type and then click Next. So right now, we only have one map type available, which is our 7.5-minute topo. This is a nominal 24K scale, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes. But this is the only map type that we have available right now. So that's already selected as the default choice. You can choose any of these little information icons to see more about what these products are and what it means, including some of the various scales over different areas. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Next, since I know I want to create a 7.5-minute topo. And then from here, it lets me know I need to select my area of interest on the map. So I have a couple different options here. I can kind of zoom in and pan around. I can zoom into the display grid, which will allow me to zoom to the level that lets me see the existing 7.5-minute quadrangles, or I can search by address. And this has been my favorite location recently. This is Woodland Park, Colorado. I have a family friend who lives in Woodland Park, and he is a map geek like we all are, and he wants a topographic map for his house, which is in Woodland Park. And if you can see, this area falls across 2 quadrangle boundaries, and I even went through our full historic topo map collection trying to find him a map that would cover all of the city of Woodland Park, which is just this small town south of Denver, Colorado. And we have no way of creating one single seamless map of Woodland Park for him, or at least we didn't until we had Topo Builder. So right now I have 2 choices. I can choose the custom select, which again is the default choice, which will allow me to click on a center point. So I'm going to just click at that center point of Woodland Park and zoom out a little. And you can see that I now have a 7.5-minute extent. So again, it's still the 7.5-minute extent, but a 7.5 minutes extent custom centered over Woodland Park. If I wanted to select by grids instead, let's say I wanted a map of Palmer Lake, I could choose the select by grids and select Palmer Lake, and you can see that shown in its has a different outline to show that these products are different. So you can request multiple maps. You can request an unlimited amount of maps right now. It doesn't matter how many, what type. If I had put this Woodland Park map in the wrong location, I could come in here and move this extent kind of to get it exactly centered where I'd like it. You can only move the custom extents. I can't move the on-grid maps. Those are limited to stay within the quadrangle boundaries. With the maps that I have added, you can see I have a 7.5-minute topo, and these are the map types. And then I have 7.5-minute topo 1, and then I have Palmer Lake. So anything that's a custom extent is going to be listed with 7.5-minute topo and then a number to kind of increment as you add more maps. And then anything that is an on-grid map will include that quadrangle name. Under each map, I have a couple of customization options. I can choose my export format, which right now we have PDF or TIFF, and these are almost all geospatial PDFs or GeoTIFFs. There's some exceptions in areas where we have imagery limitations. You could get just a standard TIFF instead of a GeoTIFF in those cases. But you can choose PDF or TIFF. So I'm going to choose TIFF for this one. And then I can also set my contour smoothing options. So here I have low, medium, and high. Medium is the default choice. This is going to be most similar to the classic contours that you would see on a US Topo product. But if you're unsure about which contour smoothing option you might want to choose or why, you can choose that little information icon and then go through the low, medium, and high contour smoothing options. And each of these include a best for statement. So the high smoothing is best for those who are looking at this. The medium is best for this. And so each of these kind of give you a little bit more information if you're not as knowledgeable on contours and what they're intended for or what you might need for your specific purpose. So I'm going to leave this set to the medium option. And then I'm going to go to my Palmer Lake quadrangle. And on this one, I'm going to leave it set as a PDF export. And in this case, I'm going to set it to high contour smoothing. For high contour smoothing, that means high smoothing, low detail. So that means I just want a kind of general lay of the land. I don't need to see all of the detailed information. So from here, I've got multiple maps in my list, and then I need to check the ones that I would like to add to the cart. And you'll see that my cart button is grayed out right now because I haven't selected any maps in to be added yet. So in this case, I'm just going to say, you know what, I only want this custom quadrangle. I only want this one that's centered over Woodland Park and near Mount Deception. And then I'm going to click Add. Now you can see in the cart tab, which I have not moved on to yet, there is one map in my cart. And I don't need this Palmer Lake quad, so I'm just going to click Go to Cart. Once I'm in my cart, this is where you can review all of the details of the maps that you've requested. So for example, I can see I have 7.5-minute topo. It has a custom extent with medium contour smoothing, and it's in a TIFF format. If, for example, I accidentally chose one of the wrong options or I wanted to go back and modify things, I can click Edit the Maps. And then I can say, you know what, I want this to have low contour smoothing because I really want to see all of that detailed topographic information. And then I'm going to click Save. And now you can see that the low contour smoothing option has been saved, and I'll get that high detail on my map. So it's really as simple as that, 1, 2, 3 for all of these steps. And then I'm just going to click Checkout. And all you need to do to use this system is enter an email address. You don't need any login credentials. You don't need any registration, anything like that. So I'm going to enter my email address, and I'm going to click Checkout. And then it lets me know it's processing my order and also includes an little information that I can download the US topos with a link to get to those products in case I would like those as well. And now you can see it spinning and saying it's exporting. So what's happening now is behind the scenes, this map request is being submitted to our queue. And then we get this successful or succeeded message that says, thank you. A confirmation email is on your way. This is how you know that your request was submitted successfully. And then it also gives you information on where you can learn more if you'd like to go to our Topographic Maps webpage, or how to contact us if you have any questions. So I'm just going to close that for now. And then just one other little snippet, there is a user guide embedded within the application, as well as some other help materials embedded throughout. So those are all available as well. So now I'm going to switch past the demo slides and continue on. So now that I've submitted my request, what happens next? So you're going to receive 2 emails from us. The first email is going to let us know that your request was submitted and that we've got it. Then your second email is going to let you know that your map has been completed, it's ready to be downloaded, and it does have a direct link in that email that you can click on to download your map product. So as of right now, we are considering this project or application to be in a pilot phase. And what that means is we have released this for a limited time with the expectation that we want to collect user interest and demand in this type of capability. And we will be using the information that we collect during the pilot to develop plans for our future phases. So with that, these maps can take up to 5 days to be delivered. It's not an immediate turnaround. Many maps are delivered much sooner, typically in the 24 to 48 hour time frame. When we initially launched 4 weeks ago, we had a very strong interest in the application, and so we were closer to that 5-day, in some cases more turnaround. But for now, you should expect your map in less than 5 days. If you have any problems getting your map or anything like that, you can contact us. But your file is available for 60 days. You have 60 days to download it from this link. Even though this link is delivered to your inbox uniquely to you, you can share this link with your friends, your peers, your coworkers, and they can also download that file and access it. So this is just more on the need help. So on our National Map Topo Builder webpage, there's a lot of information about this application, the associated on-demand topo maps, which are the output maps from this system. I've included a link to our user guide, and then this is our TNM help email. So this is the portal if you have any questions. If you don't receive your second email, it doesn't happen a lot, but in case that were to happen, you can email them and say, hey, where's my map? Let us know what you think of the application. Let us know what you think of the maps. Let us know if you have any other questions, comments, or challenges so that we can support you. So that was the application, but let's kind of talk a little bit about the maps themselves. So kind of what's the difference between what USGS has been doing historically with the US topos and our previous 7.5-minute maps and what you see from Topo Builder and the on-demand topos. So this is Horseshoe Bend or Glen Canyon, near Glen Canyon. And if you were trying to get a US topo of Horseshoe Bend using the US topo products, you would have to download 4 maps to cover that area of interest. With the on-demand topos, you can choose your area of interest and get 1 map that covers exactly the area that you need. So this isn't 4 maps that are stitched together. This is 1 map centered where you want that is custom generated on demand for that center point. So a little bit more about US Topo and the on-demand topos. So for US Topo, we have 1 to 24,000 scale in CONUS in Hawaii. Same thing for the on-demand topo maps. We have 1 to 25,000 in Alaska. Same for the on-demand topo maps. We have 1 to 20,000 for Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands for US Topo. With the on-demand topo, same scale, but we include all of the US territories. Now, the US territories do have some limited data. There is some incomplete data in those areas, but you can request a map and get a map of those areas just as easily as you could of Horseshoe Bend, for example. And then for the US Topo maps, and this is a little bit more future planning, but the US Topo is produced only at these 3 scales for these areas. With the on-demand topos, we have these scales and we are planning multi-scale maps in future releases, and those are some of the things that we're working on right now. So a little bit more for comparison between the two. For US Topo, these maps are staged, which means they are free and immediate downloads at any time. The on-demand topos are created on demand, meaning that you request the map and then there is a delay in the time to get them. But again, we're hitting kind of that 24 to 48 hour turnaround time right now. US Topo is limited to the standard USGS quadrangles. The on-demand topos, you can have the custom extent. Again, it's a 7.5 minute equivalent right now, but we do plan to include custom extents in the future, like a truly custom AOI. US Topo has pre-designed contours. With on-demand topos, our contours are generated on the fly using the latest and greatest 3DEP and national elevation data. For US Topo, those are updated on the 3-year cycle. What this means is that depending on which area of the country you're looking at, you could be seeing data or maps that are up to 3 years old. With on-demand Topo, we're using the best available data, meaning that at the time that you make your request, you are getting access to the most current or best available national map data that we have within our holdings. And then again, the US Topo with those staged products are free and immediate downloads. We do have a pay to print option through the USGS store or other commercial providers. The on-demand topos are currently available for a limited time, and this kind of goes back to that pilot statement that I mentioned earlier, with the fact that we're collecting user interest and demand in this capability, and then we'll use that information to develop plans for future phases. And all of that information will be shared on our National Geospatial Program web pages. So those links that I shared earlier, that's where you can find information as these phases develop and what the next plans are. So now I want to talk about hydro a little bit, get to the meat of what some of you may be most interested in. So I've talked a lot about best available data and, haven't really defined what that means. So in most cases, and actually in all cases except for hydrography, you're going to see the most current data within about 24 hours. So we run nightly syncs. Those syncs replicate up to our servers. And when you're hitting those servers, you're going to get that data from essentially the last day. When it comes to hydrography, hydrography is special. I think most of you know that hydrography is special. So there's some additional work that we do to the hydrography to make it what we call map ready, meaning that it's put into the environment that we use to generate the maps in a state that is optimized for cartographic production. So the hydrography that we get from the National Hydrography data set is post-processed for some of these the cartographic map generation processes. It is not nightly, but it is ran on a regular schedule. What this means is you don't have to wait for the US Topo schedule, you don't have to wait for the staged products or the services update cycles, but just don't expect a 24-hour turnaround time with a hydrography edit at this point. Some of the future work that we have planned is to coordinate with the hydrography leads on the 3D-HP program, as well as how we can further automate these processes so that you can get access to even more current hydrography than we're showing on these maps right now. And so just to kind of give you guys a little bit more context around that, some of the things that we do include updating the sea ocean features. So here on the left, what you're seeing is, I believe this is the San Francisco Bay. I didn't put it into my notes and now I'm slipping my mind. But the way that NHD works, we have the sea ocean features and then we can have the bay inlets overlapping those features. This creates a challenge for the cartographic products because what we end up with is duplicate labels showing the Pacific Ocean over in addition to the bays. And so what you see on the right here is this yellow is our updated sea ocean polygon. And then we actually remove the labels or don't include the labels for these sea ocean features. We label from our own polygon that we've modified for cartographic purposes. And then we only label the bay inlet features using those features from NHD. One of the other updates that we do is we do not display artificial paths on the cartographic products because these are really about network connectivity not about the topographic lay of the land. And so on the left here, what you see is an NHD flow line that contains the GNS ID and GNIS name. This is the Rio Grande. This is an artificial path. What we end up doing is if you look at the area feature on the right, and I didn't show this modified, but the area feature on the right directly from NHD does not include the GNS ID or the GNIS name. So we actually run our own conflation process that takes the Rio Grande name from the artificial path, associates it with that 2D NHD area stream river feature, and then that's how we actually label on the cartographic products. So that's one of the other post processes that we do. And then one of the last ones that we do is related to springs, waterfalls, and rapids. So what we do for these features is we take the geometry from the National Hydrography data set, but we label these features from GNIS. The reason that we do this is if we just look at the springs example on this slide, in NHD Point, there's 150,000 spring features. 24,000 of those have names on them. But if we look at GNIS, there's 35,000, almost 36,000 named spring features in GNIS. So what we do is we actually take the name from GNIS so that we can get as many names onto the maps as possible for the springs, waterfalls, and rapids. So those are some of the things that we do to post-process hydro and why you might not be seeing that 24-hour turnaround time when it comes to your edit. Now, again, any of the edits that you do make will make it into the core NHD, which will then be associated with our cartographic products, but just that post-processing takes us a little bit of extra time. So to give you guys a little overview on our schedule and our future plans, right now, this is where we're at in 2022. We have our public pilot that, as I mentioned, was released February 22nd and 23rd. For this version, you have that user-centered extent that I showed, the contour smoothing options, and then the 1 to 24K nominal scale with the additional scales for Alaska and the territories, as well as the GeoTIFF or geospatial PDF outputs. Looking forward to this fall, we are planning some new capabilities and another map product type. So the first thing that we would like to add is our map tracking. So this is a direct result of the feedback that we've received over the last 4 weeks of the public pilot. So as users started using the system, they started asking, where's my map? How do I know what the status of my map is? And so we're going to be adding a map tracking ID so that users can use that to check versus emailing us, waiting for a response. They can just kind of live see what the status of their request is. For user selected layers, what we would like to do is allow users to choose which national map layers they would like to see included on their output file. So in this example that you see here on the left, I could say, for example, I don't want PLSS or the terrain or the imagery. And so when I get my map delivered, it would only include those layers that I had asked for. And then the last thing that we're working on for the fall is the 1 to 100,000 scale. So this will be our first multi-scale map product. And this is kind of a prototype or an early version of what a 1 to 100,000 scale map would look like. And this is the Denver North quadrangle. So these would be using both the 30 by 60 quadrangles that we have in our map indices, as well as the custom extents. And then for future releases, what we're planning to do is user-added content. So this would be the ability for users to actually add their own data to the maps. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to map a fire or an oil spill or any other scenarios. I could say, okay, I'm going to add the extent of this fire, or I'm going to add the extent of this oil spill, or whatever it may be. And then that would also come on your output map file. I mentioned this previously too, but we'd like to see the truly custom area of interest. So the ability for users not to be limited to a quadrangle equivalent extent, whether it's the 7.5 minute or 30 by 60 or whatever it may be, but being able to truly define the shape that they'd like for their output map. We'd also like to include a GIS data download so you could get the associated data that was used to create that map. We'd like to add print capabilities so that you could get that hard copy map and take it out into the field. And then we have additional scales and additional map types planned. So I'm going to pause for a second before I go on to the additional map types. There was a question in the chat asking if there's any option for a rush or an emergency to get yours through. So what we're calling these is a priority queue. So is there some way to say that specific users have a specific need to go to the top of our priority queue and get their map sooner? That is in the plan, but we chose not to include that during the pilot phase, which we're in right now. During the pilot phase, all users are treated equally. We wanted to be able to get a really good idea of where maps were being requested with different customization options, and have, you know, kind of nothing skewing those statistics and metrics, but we do plan to include that priority queue in the future. So Lance Clampett is our emergency response coordinator here. So Lance could come in, for example, and say, hey, there's a fire in this area. We're creating a series of maps. His request would go to the top of our queue, and those would be delivered first. But that will be another future phase item for us. And then another question that was in the chat is about the TIF. Is it a georeference TIF? Yes, it is a GeoTIF in almost all cases. And if we have Tracy on the phone, he can help me out with this one, but I believe the exception to that is some of the areas in Alaska where we have imagery licensing limitations. And in those areas, we just have a straight TIF. So it's not a geospatial TIF or a GeoTIF, sorry. Okay, so for the additional map types, and this is one of the other areas I'm interested to share with you guys. So right now, we have a plan to add one additional map type each year for the next 5 years. And under that, we'll be adding those other customizations that I mentioned, like the custom area of interest, the user added content, things like that. But we've kind of shaped our vision for the next 3 years. So this year, we have the 7.5-minute topo. Next year, we will have the 100,000 scale topo. And then in 2024, we're planning to release the 250,000 scale topo. From there, that's where things are still a little bit fuzzy, not in the sense that we don't have a plan, but in the sense that we're really trying to drive this activity and this project from a user-centric perspective, meaning that based on what we're seeing from the user community, based on discussions like I'm having with you guys today, what is most needed from the user perspective? So some of the things that we have in the idea generation bucket right now for 2025 and 2026 are a 1 to 50,000 scale product, a 1 to 12,000 scale product, which is dependent on us having data for, which you guys are kind of leading the charge in the hydrography arena with local resolution content. We don't have that nationally at this point. And then we've also been discussing with various groups a hydrologic unit-based map. So the extent would be based on a hydrologic unit or a county. And that's something else that we've seen from the pilot is a lot of people are requesting maps that cover county boundaries. And so we're trying to really listen and learn through this pilot so that we can be very user-centric as we finalize the plans for our future years, these future map types, as well as the capabilities. So to give you guys a little bit of insight into some of the pilot results that we've seen, this is just showing the coverage of where maps have been requested over the last month. So USGS has produced and delivered over 24,000 maps in the last 4 weeks. As we started looking at this coverage, we started asking ourselves questions. Do they align with national park boundaries? Do they align with counties? Do they align with cities? And the answer to that is yes to all of them. If you can see here, this block in the center is Denali National Park. But really, when it comes to CONUS, Alaska, the islands and territories, people have been requesting maps pretty much everywhere. However, for your guys' purposes, we have seen a couple interesting results. So this first one is the Colville River, which is in northern Alaska. And these little dots indicate anywhere that a map has been requested. And if I were to turn on the grids, you would see that for the Colville River, which is shown in dark blue, a user came in and requested every single map that was from the headwater to the mouth of the Colville River. And then this is another example, which I hope I am pronouncing right, is the Noatak River, which is also in northern Alaska. And again, if I were to put on the quadrangle boundaries, you would see that a user came in and requested every map for this section of the Noatak River. So these are some of the things that we're looking at through the pilot and trying to understand what are some of the use cases for these types of maps, what do people need, and what are they interested in. Like I said, they do also cover national parks. They do also cover counties. They do also cover cities. But I thought this was just so interesting from a hydrography perspective. And it made me so curious who this user was and what they were wanting to do with these maps so that we could understand that use case better. So I'm about done and almost out of time, I think, so that we have some room for questions and discussions. But the pilot is available. Please access topobuilder.nationalmap.gov, create some maps, see what the output on-demand topos look like. Let us know what you think. As a reminder, the Topo Builder application is using the best available data from the national map to create these on-demand topo maps. You can choose your file format, your area of interest, and your level of contour smoothness. What you see now is not all you're going to get. We do have those additional customization scales and map types planned for the future. And then also for anybody who knows and loves our US Topo products, those stage maps are continuing to be produced and are still available as free and immediate downloads. And there's a link embedded here too to our national map downloader. If you're not familiar with that, I hope you all are, but that's how I get our data and our maps. But you can always access those US topos at any time. And with that, I guess I will stop and open it up for question and discussion, other than thanking you guys for your time. Like I said, I was so excited to be able to come and talk to my hydrography people again. Okay, so got a couple questions. So is there a consideration for different request production pathway for specific users? So what I would say to that is that would go back to the priority queue question from earlier. Right now, everybody's being treated equally. So if a user requests one map or requests 500 maps, which we have seen people requesting upwards of 300 and 400 maps already, everybody kind of goes into the queue equally. It's kind of a first in, first out type situation right now. But in the future, we do want to develop some priority queues for different use cases, but we haven't exactly figured out how those will be managed. Now, the hope is that that 5-day delivery window that we're committed to right now, but that we're now beating with the 24 to 48-hour turnaround time, will continue to get even shorter. A lot of what I didn't share in these slides is what we're doing on the back end for the actual system architecture and the map-ready data concept that I talked about earlier. We are working very hard to not only build this system, but also stage all of the data that we need in the most efficient way possible so that we can get these maps even faster. I will say that I requested 2 maps yesterday, and they were delivered to me, both maps were delivered to me in less than 2 hours. So the system is able to scale based on demand so that we can always meet that 5-day window. But we would, of course, love to see it sooner. So for example, if we're thinking about that Alaska River requester, what if that person came in on a Wednesday because they were going out into the field on a Thursday and wanted to take all of the maps as they were kind of surveying along that river? Right now, they might not get their maps in time to take them out into the field. So we really want to think about how can we get these into the hands of the users as fast as possible, while at the same time thinking about where are there specific use cases for certain people to kind of go into that priority queue and jump ahead of the line in some cases. And then, is a TPK option being considered for the future? I'm going to admit I'm not familiar with that acronym. Can you explain what you meant by that?
All right, can you hear me? Yeah, so tile packages are frequently used when going offline in like collector, survey 123, and that's where I'm wondering if there's going to be the ability to, print off your own quad map and be able to take that offline using survey 123 or collector.
Okay, good use case that I had not thought of, so I will make a note of that. I will say I have downloaded the on-demand topos to my mobile device and used, I think it's one of the Avenza apps to take it out and kind of walk around and use the geospatial functions, but I haven't thought about using it in a disconnected way. So that's a good idea. Consider having a link to Topo Builder on the TNM download. Yes, actually, we do have links on the TNM downloader as well as the National Map Viewer that link to the Topo Builder page so that users kind of know that this new system is available. So we've kind of tried to make that two-way communication. From Topo Builder, you can get a link to the National Map Downloader. From the National Map Downloader and the Viewer, you can get a link to Topo Builder. So it does go both ways. One of the other things that we are planning to do, and this is in its early research phases right now, is we want to add an option for users to know when the map was last generated. So for example, if I came in and wanted to create that map of Woodland Park, Colorado, I just put another request into our queue. I created Woodland Park yesterday. That was one of the maps that I got in 2 hours. So I created Woodland Park yesterday. So if a new user came in and also requested a map of Woodland Park, we want to give some information back to the user that says, hey, there's a map of Woodland Park that was created on March 21st. Would you like to download that map, or would you like to request a new one? Understanding that you're going to have to wait a little bit for it to be generated. But then again, also, if you don't want to wait at all, or you don't want this, here's a link to that exact stage product available from US Topo that you could download that exact same extent. But that only works for the on-grids, not the custom extents. But those are definitely things that we are planning, that we are trying to figure out how to implement. But because we're in a pilot phase right now, we don't have everything kind of fully fleshed out like we would like it for the eventual future. Okay, are there any plans to make the 100K base map vector data available through the TNM downloader? That is another piece that is in early discussion. So for hydrography purposes especially, this has been very interesting as we've developed the 100K prototypes. So with the GIS data download, you would be able to get the GIS data for that map extent. But what about all 100K data, right? So for the prototype of the 100K product and for the initial release of the 100K product, we are not planning to include the 100K data as a set staged product. But what we would like to do for the future is utilize the National Map Visibility Filter attribute that has already been incorporated into the National Hydrography data set. That attribute is a National Map attribute. It's not a hydrography attribute. It's just hydrography was the leader in that, just like they're the leader with the local resolution data. And so what we'd like to do is, as the 100K and other multi-scale products develop, we'd actually like to write back to the other national map data sets those visibility filter values so that users could request and download the staged products for any scale that they wanted, which again, right now, the way it's designed, you have to filter it yourself. And then we'd also like to use that data to create the zoom levels for all of our services. So lots of future plans there. We're not there yet, but those are absolutely some of the things that we would like to kind of take some of what we've learned from Topo Builder and then leverage it to support the National Map Program overall. And then is there label adjustment to help prevent cutoff labels along dynamic boundaries? So we are using a full auto labeling process using Maplex for the labels on the on-demand topos. If anybody's familiar with the details of US Topo for those products, We essentially generate annotation, and then we can manually move labels to deal with cutoffs and things like that. I would say that in almost all cases, we have not had major issues with the automatic label placement that we're using from Maplex. So I haven't seen any specific cases of this myself, but if you as a user do happen to request a map and see any issues with the labels, that's where you can contact that TNM help portal and say, hey, I have an issue with this map, and then we will absolutely put it into the queue for improvement. And then how do you cite these in, say, a research paper? They can never have a DOI number. So US topo products technically do have a DOI. They also have a barcode, but all of the US topo maps have a credit note and some disclaimers and limitations for use. We have similar but different information on the on-demand topos. There is a credit note. There is kind of disclaimer and limitations for use on there. So these can absolutely be cited. The metadata XML is attached to these products as well. So you can use the map generation date, the download link, so that it can really use that for citing properly to say this is a map that was created on this date with this content, and all of that should be embedded within the on-demand topos for your use for citations. And that actually has been a very popular question. So thanks for bringing that one up, Greg, because a lot of people are like, I don't want to have to use 4 US topos for my study area in my paper. And with this, you can just create the one on-demand topo and then cite that map product. Any other questions, comments, or feedback at this time?
I'll say one thing, Ariel, that your maps have come in handy already from a hydro standpoint. As I mentioned to you the other day, we were working here with our steward, Jane Schaefer-Kramer, and California Department of Water Resources. A user had asked about hydrography showing up on the topo maps. They had questions about, well, why is it showing up or why is it not showing up? And the latest US topo didn't show changes that have been made. Also, the advanced viewer didn't show those changes either, which had been made recently, but we're able to rapidly, I do mean rapidly, within half an hour, it returned a custom topo. Okay,
Yay.
so we must have timed it perfectly well, but it popped up and it showed right there the data change to the hydrography. There's an attribution change which showed exactly as expected on the map. So there we go. That was wonderful.
Makes my heart happy. That's exactly one of those cases that we're hoping that, or those needs that we can fill through this application and the system. So it's great to hear that feedback, Drew. And I'm happy that it served your purpose.
Yep. Oh, we have a Tracy, hands up.
Yeah, that was really interesting. The rivers you showed in Alaska, and I know sometimes some of the people I've talked to in the past, they're looking at long raft river runs and potential the need for that. So that would be interesting to see across the U.S. if you eventually get a lot of those kind of requests, right? I could see myself doing that, leading some Boy Scouts out or something. Also, both of those areas are really high potential for future roads and mining activities in Alaska. So that might have something to do with it as well.
I know. I was trying to figure out, I was like, what other stuff is going on up there in that part of Alaska that would make this pertinent to the user? And I was wondering if it was related to oil and gas development or mining or something like that. So, or was it recreation, right? And yeah, because we're not, we only collect the user's email and we don't share that with anyone. All we can learn from the metrics is kind of what email domain they're coming from. Is it a .gov, a .edu, a .com, which overwhelmingly we've seen .com requests. So like 75% of those 24,000 requests that we've seen have come from .com domains, but that's very quickly followed by .gov and .edu. And so really for all of those users, we have a lot of curiosity around what people want and what people need and what they're using these maps for. But we are somewhat limited within the government on how we can kind of survey people and ask them those questions. But there's still a lot that we can learn from what we're seeing now and by having discussions like this with all of you.
Ariel, this is Becky. I have a question about the .coms. Are the .coms, I don't know if you can tell with the domain, are they like Google.com? Are they basically, are they coming from personal accounts where people are using a commercial, just personal account, or do they seem to be businesses themselves?
We have not parsed it to that level yet. So I can't answer that question off the top of my head.
Errol, that was a great presentation and demo. Thank you so much for doing that. You're going to be hearing a lot, I'm sure, from the crowd here in the future in terms of more questions and new maps being generated. So thank you so much for being able to present today.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and call today's meeting. Next call will be April 26th. Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great day, and hopefully y'all be getting some new topo soon. So look forward to hearing from everyone how it works and for hydro data.